This is TWiT.
You may remember we talked about it last week. Phil Spencer felt compelled to explain what's going on with Xbox.
My favorite part about this event, which was last Thursday, was that he literally started by saying, when we were planning this back in December, all we were going to talk about was what we were doing with Activision Blizzard. And I could feel the little bell go off, ding, 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 you won the, And that was my kind of expectation. But because of all the rumors about, cross-platform and everything, they felt compelled to talk about that stuff first. But when I looked at this, I don't think that was all that important, frankly. We'll get to it, but a lot of it was just a reiteration of strategy that has been in place for a long time. I know there was a lot of angst and kind of hand-wringing, the past week or two. I hope everyone feels better, right? Because I think this went great, and I think they're doing the right thing. Unfortunately, they are being vague on the specifics of Activision Blizzard because we know now that the first of those games will appear on Game Pass on March 24th, which is seriously March 24th? Come on. And then we don't know anything beyond that. So does that mean we get like one game a week or, who knows? I suppose it's understandable they want to milk this, spend the rest of the year. Oh, here's a new one. So we'll probably have a lot of that. But they reiterated some things and kind of confirmed that they apply to Activision Blizzard, which I think is important. So, for example, all first-party Xbox games will appear on Game Pass on day one, and that does include Activision Blizzard and ZeniMax and everything else they own, right? So, to me, that's important. I would have understood if that wasn't the case. I think they might have complicated matters. Otherwise, imagine a situation where, say, the next Call of Duty was purchase only for the first month or two. I think a lot of Game Pass fans might have revolted over that kind of a thing. Because of the cross-platform rumors and also some of the realities there, they dropped this kind of a bomb. I'll call it Game Pass will only be available on Xbox, right? Now, we're going to be careful about what that means because what is Xbox? What is Xbox, right? I think for a lot of people, Xbox is the console, but that's not what Xbox is, right? Xbox is this platform, this ecosystem. So we have Game Pass on the PC, but that's considered Xbox, right? So I think that this is a moving target. And I think that this might evolve to include other platforms in the form of such things as a Game Pass mobile that may appear on iOS if they can ever get their act together there, maybe Europe only. We'll see how those things evolve. And I don't think it precludes Game Pass coming to other consoles, frankly, because, this is the whole mantra, like we're going to meet gamers where they are. So we'll see, but that's kind of where that's at. Exclusivity, it's been a long thing. Ever since there's been a PC play in the most recent era, we've been concerned about what it means to be exclusive. Sony obviously has exclusives. They're doing a great job compared to Xbox. We have Xbox exclusives in the Microsoft space, but it's Xbox ecosystem. He explained a lot of things I wish didn't need explaining. I had written about this myself when I saw all of the angst and everything about people benefiting no matter what platform they play on when games are in more places, right? You have people to play with, people to play against, bigger audience, et cetera. It's better for creators, the people that make the games, more players, et cetera, right? So, it's not really new, but I feel like people need to have it kind of drilled into their head a little bit. Fans of Windows will appreciate this kind of variation on the Windows first, Windows best strategies of the past. They tried to push this notion that A, they're not getting out of hardware. B, that Xbox will always offer the best experience on Xbox hardware. And they actually talked a little bit about next-gen hardware. Now, we know there are refreshes coming, right, to the current consoles, but what they're talking about here is the next-gen, the thing that comes later. And they referred to this as the largest technical leap you have ever seen in a hardware generation.
Oh, come on.
I know. That was a little hard to accept. I feel like we're running out of
superlatives in a case like that. It's like, okay, just say it's a big jump or something.
Right. So look, you could the nice thing about that statement is it could mean anything, right? So, for example, if Microsoft moves to ARM, right, which is one of the rumors, not a rumor, that was one of the leaks as a possibility. If Microsoft moves to ARM and or NPU hardware in this thing, I mean, you could argue that this meets that definition. I mean, I think, in games we have very standard concerns, which we've had for a long, long time. And it always kind of boils down to resolution and frame rate, frankly. And then, of course, latency if you're playing online and things like ray tracing. I guess we'll just call it quality, like quality of graphics. I think we hit a wall, not just in Xbox, but just in gaming with hyper-realistic graphics and the need to have a Hollywood-style movie production budget to make these games. And that maybe Nintendo, if they could teach us anything as an industry, is that, the game matters a lot. Maybe focus on that first, and that we kind of navel gaze over these little spec things. But it's not like we're going to 8K 60 for the next gen, right? That would be a huge technical leap, but I don't think we need it. And I don't think it's going to happen either. So it's hard to say what they meant by that, because that sentence I read was the whole thing they said about it. So there's not a lot of details. I do like they talked a lot about what they call game library preservation. This is the Xbox backward compatibility stuff. This notion that if you buy a game digitally, especially, they tried to figure out physical, weren't able to do that, but you buy a game digitally and it comes forward with you, right? And one of the things that came out after this show was this notion that this stuff is all going to probably end up on game streaming, cloud streaming, meaning that if you have this library of games that goes back, possibly the OG Xbox, you'll be able to play these things in the future. So there's some way forward for you as an Xbox fan. I think that's hugely important. Obviously, they didn't get into specifics about the next gen. There are issues with compatibility when you switch chipsets, right? We went from an Intel Celeron in the first gen to PowerPC back to an AMD x86 type chip in the two most recent generations. It's almost certainly going to change again. And there are challenges there, obviously. But, they're big on cross-play, cross-save, cross-progression, backward compatibility. This whole kind of notion of what makes Xbox unique and special, I think is awesome. So then now I will. They actually put this up front because of all the speculation. And I didn't like the way they did this. They were forced to, right? They weren't ready to say this. But basically what they admitted at the time, right up front in the show, was that they are going to bring 4 games to other consoles, was how they described it. Not a big change in their strategy, not anything about whatever. It just, but they didn't say what those games were. And the idea was that the studios in charge of them were getting ready to make their own announcements. Phil Spencer did say neither of those was Starfield or Indiana Jones, right? But he also gave these kind of interesting hints about the types of games, right? These aren't the big franchise games. Like I would have guessed if you had said, I'm going to bring 4 games from the Xbox stable cross-platform that are not today cross-platform, I would have said Halo, Gears of War, Flight Sim, maybe a Forza game, that kind of thing. No, these are smaller games. These are games that they looked at and said, there's a service-based component to this. There are communities that love these games. They're smaller typically. They were never really meant to be platform exclusives, and they're games Xbox felt deserved more of a chance to kind of get out in the world. Now, today, just before the show started, they just announced what those games were. So I don't know, I guess 6 days was enough. And those games are Sea of Thieves, right, which was one of the ones I had guessed after that fact. Hi-Fi Rush, which I've never really even heard of. Grounded and Pentiment. And Pentiment is a game I'm actually pretty familiar with. So what did I guess? I had guessed, let me see if I can find this. I guess knowing that it wasn't Forza, Halo, et cetera, I'd guess Sea of Thieves and maybe As Dusk Falls, but those are the 4 games. So they came out today and said that that's what's happening, and they're coming to Sony and Nintendo, right? Although not all of them on each, and obviously we have to have a confusing matrix of availability because that's what we do. Anywho, I hope that other than kind of some of the vague stuff, right? The biggest technical leak we're ever seen in a hardware generation, right? Hilarious. And I don't know, we don't know when Activision Blizzard, they've been talking about this internally since December. And the only thing they were able to announce 3 months later was Diablo 4 on March 24th. Like, guys, come on. Like, I'm not saying you have to lay out the schedule, but there must be an idea of how this stuff is going to come out. So we just don't know what that is. Anyway, we'll have more Xbox news as we always do, but I wanted to throw this one up front because this was kind of the day of destiny for Xbox fans anyway. And as they reiterated a bunch of times, I don't see much has changed from a strategy perspective. It's just that now they have an incredible stable of first-party games. And so they were at least able to verify that all the first-party stuff would continue to be available on Game Pass on day one, which is neat. So whenever the next Call of Duty comes out, I guess we'll get that on Game Pass. We'll see what the sales look like. They're probably I'm guessing Game Pass sales are going to go up and Call of Duty sales are going to go down, but we'll see.
Do you think Microsoft's given up on trying to beat PS5 with Xbox? Yeah. They know they're just PS5's just going to win. And so might as well put their stuff on PS5.
I was surprised how emphatic they were that Xbox doesn't exist without the console.
That's an interesting point. You're right.
I think it's it's one of those marketing things, right? You can't Osborne the platform, right? And there's no way that the long-term strategy is less and less reliance on the console. The one argument I could make to keeping this stuff afloat, although it's super expensive to do the R&D and everything, is that now that they have all these Activision Blizzard games, they have something that can subsidize it essentially, right? I mean, this is the thing they didn't have before. And Microsoft, it's hard to line these things up, but they've launched new consoles without a new Halo title at day one. Like that, to me, those things should always be aligned. And because they only have a handful of super popular first-party games, right? Yeah. Now they have more, a lot more. And maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So, I mean, but they did say we're going to make another console. We're going to make another one. It's going to be the best one ever. So
of course it is.
They're still involved in the hardware, even though it's a money loser for them, right? The games aren't. The games aren't. Software's not. Or is it?
So, one thing I've been reading Steven Snofsky's book. And there's no jokes to be made here that are in any way polite. So I'll just say, I'm trying to think, how do I say this?
Oh, don't be polite. Why bother?
I'm thinking more, even more from sort of a personal perspective. There's no doubt that I experienced some form of PTSD from this guy and the shabby way he treated people like Mary Jo and I. I studiously avoided this book for a variety of reasons because I didn't want to relive it again, But then, I think maybe I talked about this last week. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but look, if you care about Windows as much as I do, I mean, you have to. So I read it and I've got Tourette's over there. I'm screaming at nobody. And, as I'm reading it and all the mistruths and the bizarre interpretations of events, but he was inside Microsoft. Anyway, one of the things, and there are these little facts that kind of come out. He talks about, he's verified a lot of the stuff I've said about Microsoft continually fighting the web as a platform and losing. And they knew that so long ago, and they just kept going. And and he saw that as a huge mistake. So I certainly agree with him on some things. Anyway, one of the little tidbits that he came out with was that Xbox has never made money, and if it wasn't for the console, it's sort of a break-even business. Is the way he described it. So, if it was just software, it would probably be doing pretty well. And obviously these days with just software, with Activision, Blizzard, ZeniMax, et cetera, that's a pretty solid business right there,
So how important is it they make their own hardware at all? I mean, is it just pride?
Believe that, no, I think it honestly has to do more with fans. And I just based on my own interaction with people who there are certain kind of religious topics in our industry.
Yeah.
The Chromium web render is one where people they line up and they just la 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 la. They don't listen. No one's seeing both sides of it. And arguably the enshirtification stuff. I think most people kind of agree with that. But there are these things where people just kind of walled garden ecosystems versus open ecosystems, and people feel very strongly about one side or the other, and they have a hard time seeing the other side of it. And I think in the Xbox world, gamers, console players, Xbox is not a thing unless there's a console, and whether Microsoft internally believes that to be true or not, I don't think they do. I do think they believe that enough people would leave if they announce today we're not doing any more consoles, I think the business might start to tank.
Yeah.
Just because so many people would walk away.
Yeah.
So I think they need time to show people how, there'll become a day someday where you'll be able to stream your entire Xbox library of games from the past onto a PlayStation probably, and it will be an eye-opening moment for people where they realize that the platform that they thought was a piece of hardware, which they're very explicit was not, is not. It's this other thing, Yeah. There's no net.
It's weird for me when you say Xbox, and I'm including the hardware in this. Like there's something but there is, and I think it's important context. Hey, it's me, Leo Laporte. I hope you've enjoyed this little snippet from Windows Weekly. If you want to see more and want to catch the whole show, you can subscribe in your favorite podcast client or visit our website, twit.tv/WW. And of course, there's links right below me.